As anyone who is part of the community knows, the Fortnite storyline is very convoluted and confusing, with any theories people come up with being disproved almost immediately afterwards. However, with the release of Chapter 2 Season 5, we have gotten a lot of story content, and this, along with information we already had before, helped me into coming up with what I think is the definitive storyline of Fortnite Battle Royale. And today, I'm going to share the entire Fortnite timeline with you guys in a short video tightly packed with information. This video was made at the beginning of Chapter 2 Season 5, so of course this information is subject to change in the future. So this video might age badly, but I think I got it. So without further ado, I present the entire Fortnite storyline explained. To understand the Fortnite storyline, we must first understand the multiverse theory. The multiverse theory states that there are an infinite amount of universes other than our own. As there are infinite universes, technically every single possible event that can happen did happen in one of the universes. This means that there are infinite realities, and that everything that you can possibly think of is actually real, just in a reality other than our own. This extends to fiction in our world. For example, something like Stranger Things is just a fictional television show in our universe, but according to the multiverse theory, the events of the show actually happened in another reality. So now let's get to Fortnite. In the Fortnite lore, the thing which controls the ability to travel between realities is the 0 point, and the 0 point is physically located on the Fortnite island. Therefore, this makes the Fortnite island the hub world of all the different realities per se. All universes are connected through the island, including the one you and I live in. Now, humans from another reality discovered the powers of the 0 point, and they started to study it. When they realized its true potential, they created an organization called the Imagined Order, or IO. Through extensive studies, they were able to actually create a bridge to the 0 point and use it to travel to other realities. This bridge was powered by dark matter, as we can see here. Now, if you are a Fortnite player, you probably recognize this purple texture from somewhere else, but we will get to that. They hired special agents to participate in experiments with the 0 point. One of the agents to be hired was John Jones. One of the first missions of John Jones was to cross the bridge into the 0 point and see what happens when he jumped in. He jumped in, saw the island, came back, and reported his findings to IO. However, entering the center of all realities was bound to have some weird side effects. The result of someone entering and exiting the reality of the Fortnite island was called a snapshot. Pay attention because this concept is vital to the story. You see, John Jones himself came back just fine, but he actually left a snapshot on the island. For the sake of clarity, let's call John Jones' snapshot Jonesy. Every time someone enters the reality of the Fortnite island, a clone of that person is created on the island. These clones are called snapshots. Anyways, IO continued sending different agents to the island. The snapshots of these agents were the initial inhabitants of the island. We call them the default skins. At first, IO didn't notice anything wrong, but as these agents continued being sent to the island, they eventually noticed that there were a bunch of clones of them running around. They reported this to their superiors, and IO figured out that sending agents to this island would make clones of the agents. Quickly, IO decided to cover this fact up, as this was probably ethically wrong, and if word got out that they accidentally created clones, they would be scrutinized. They also decided to guard the 0 point and ensure that nobody on the island would try to escape it. There are two reasons for this. One, if a snapshot escaped their world and broke the news of what IO was doing, it would be over for the organization. Two, they have no idea what would happen if a snapshot of a person escaped into the reality of the person it was cloned after. You see, since the island is a bridge between realities, it is fine if multiple of the same person are on it. But if multiple of the same person are in a single universe, it might cause the severe damage to the very fabric of reality in that universe. Since IO didn't want to risk anything like that, They made it of the utmost importance that nobody on the island goes into the 0 point. In order to do this, IO created a militarized unit known as the Enforcers, who were specifically trained to deal with breaches in realities. However, on the island, it seemed like nobody wanted to escape. In fact, it looks like they don't even know the truth of their world. This is because of the loop, which is another important concept. Honestly, the specific knowledge of the loop we have is still iffy, but here's what we know. The island is stuck in this loop, where if people stay in it for a long enough time, they start to lose their memories and they become a whole new person. We don't know what exactly causes this loop, but we do know that the mysterious storm of dark matter surrounding the island has something to do with resetting the loop. The different snapshots of the agents, who had no way to get out of the loop, lost their memories, and in the process they developed new personalities, and they started to see each other as different people, even though they're technically the same. This is why there are so many different people on the island who look exactly the same. There are snapshots of the same person who lost their memories, and as such, they created new memories and personalities, becoming their own selves. These new inhabitants of the island forgot that they're snapshots of agents from another reality, and as a result, they forgot about the 0 point, IO, and all that. They started to make a life for themselves on the island, and believed that they always lived there with everyone else. They built houses and farms, and as more time passed, they even built cities. While this was happening, IO was still sending agents secretly to the island to continue their studies. So life seemed to be going well for the snapshots on the island, but then one day they noticed something in the sky. It was a meteor, and it seemed to be heading straight for them. The people watched as every day the meteor grew bigger and bigger in the night sky. Strangely, some people started to receive messages in Morse code sent from the meteor. They said SOS, and they don't want us to know. Clearly, this was more than just a plain old meteor. Soon, it crashed down onto the island, wreaking great destruction and havoc. Dusty Depot bore the brunt of the impact, with that part of the island turning into a giant crater. However, other smaller parts of the meteor broke off and hit other parts of the island, so there was a lot of destruction all around. However, investigation of the crash sites revealed that this meteor was more than just a rock. First, people found that there were special crystals in the meteor, which had some anti-gravity propulsion properties. They also found that in the core of the meteor, there was a pod perfectly sized for a person. Looks like the meteor had a passenger. Quickly, the government of the island built a research facility around the crash site to study the pod, and possibly contain the person inside if he escapes. However, their preparations were in vain, as eventually the person inside was able to escape. His name was simply the Visitor. The Visitor is a member of the group called the Seven. The Seven are a mysterious organization, and as the name suggests, consists of only 7 members. While their ultimate motives are a mystery, from their activities so far, it seems like their ideology is the opposite of IO's ideology. The imagined order wants stability on the island and on the 0 point, even though this means that they are trapping people in a loop. The Seven seem to want to free the people in the loop by destabilizing the 0 point, even though this could mean that reality or multiple realities could be in danger of collapsing. Honestly, it's hard to say who are the good and bad guys here, but regardless, they are fighting each other. After the Visitor escapes the facility, somehow annihilating the forces sent there to contain him, he lays low somewhere where people can't find him. He starts to make plans to destabilize reality on the island, so the people on it realize that they can escape. Using the special crystals in the meteor, he goes to a film set where a fake rocket had been built for a movie. Using the anti-gravity propulsion crystals and his own technical know-how, he is able to convert the fake rocket into an actual functional rocket. At this point, the government realizes what he's doing, but they don't want to confront him because of the fear that he will launch it if they attack. So warnings are sent out to the citizens of the island, telling them to shelter in a safe place in case the rocket is a missile and the Visitor uses it to blow up a part of the island. The day which the island dreaded arrived when the rocket finally was launched. The rocket shoots straight up into the sky before its boosters turned off and it started to arc back down towards the island. We hear the Visitor say, 0 point oscillator on, and his computer responds by setting the coordinates. The Visitor then says, engaging quantum hole accelerator, and then 4 lasers appear from the rockets and point at the target of the missile, the center of tilted towers. The boosters of the rocket fire up once more as it shoots down towards the city. But just before it hits the ground, A boom is heard as the rocket disappears into a crack in the sky. It then reappears from another crack and flies around some more before disappearing again. The rocket appears one more time from a crack at Loot Lake and flies into the sky, creating a huge crack in the sky which doesn't disappear at all. So, what exactly happened here? As we know, the 0 point allows travel between dimensions. It is a sort of bridge between space-time. If we listen to the visitor's dialogue, we can see that he turned on something called a 0 point oscillator. It seems that within the rocket, the visitor created some sort of smaller and weaker version of the 0 point, and using this, he was able to make cracks in space-time, also known as rifts. Eventually, through a final push, he was able to create a bigger, more permanent rift in the sky, which would destabilize the loop. For now, this part of the visitor's plan was a success, and he laid low on the island once again. Meanwhile, the rift in the sky seemed to be messing with reality on the island. Objects started to disappear, and artifacts from other realities began to appear on the island. What was happening here was that the rift was like an imperfect 0 point, allowing things to travel between dimensions, but it was uncontrollable, so random stuff would be transported at random times. For example, the Der Burger mascot from the restaurant was randomly transported to the middle of the California desert in our dimension. Nobody knew why some random mascot from a video game suddenly appeared in the middle of the desert, and a private investigation was launched. However, it turned up no results, and the burger was abandoned. Later, a trespasser decided to see it for himself. He was a street artist who called himself Drift, and he decided to sneak onto the property holding the burger to vandalize it. However, as he was doing it, the rift started to act up again. Not only did it take the burger back to the island, but it also took Drift along with it. The poor guy found himself in a whole other reality, but he wasn't the only one who was transported to the island. It seemed like a whole desert was transported to one of the corners of the island, and some Vikings also had their entire village rifted to the top of a mountain. Initially, Drift was pretty confused as to what happened to him, but some of the residents of the island found him and befriended him. As he spent more time inside the loop, he lost his memories of the universe he came from and his previous life. Kinda messed up, but at least he's happy, I guess. Meanwhile, over at I.O., the people there are in total panic. This time, it wasn't just a snapshot being stuck in the loop, it was actually a real person in there. Afraid that the collision of objects from different dimensions would spell disaster, they sent in their enforcers to capture Drift and bring him back to his reality. But Drift was able to fight back and hide, as well as those Vikings, who now knew how to use guns. While this was happening, the rift in the sky the visitor left was still there. However, unlike the 0 point, this rift was still unstable. While it lasted for over a month, it was now starting to shrink. When it was at its smallest, it unleashed a giant bolt of lightning and formed a cube of darkness? Let me explain. Remember that time in the beginning of the video when I told you that creating a rift between two worlds required some sort of dark matter? Well, I believe that dark matter and rifts are byproducts of each other. You need dark matter to create a rift, and rifts can bring dark matter into physical reality. Once the cube of dark matter entered the island, it immediately started to make its way to the nearest source of interdimensional power, the 0 point, located under Loot Lake. Finally, once it reached the lake, it rolled in and spread its essence across it, turning the whole lake into a pool of dark matter. It stayed like that, building power, until finally it reformed back into a cube and lifted the island at the center of the lake into the sky, revealing a hole below leading somewhere we couldn't go in there ourselves to see. The cube started to travel across the island, leaving runes at specific locations, which would act as power enhancers when the time called for it. The cube returned to above Loot Lake, and with its new power, it was able to let loose a blast of energy and break up the floating island. So, a giant cube of dark matter is obviously bound to bring some attention to it. The people of the island were, of course, very invested in this situation. But the cube also brought in the attention of other parties. A mysterious robot called AIM parachuted down to the island and started to observe the events going on. It's obvious that AIM was just some sort of robot that was reporting to someone higher, but we'll get to that later. Getting back to the cube, it started to drop some of its essence into the hole, probably down to the 0 point. Eventually, it started to spin and released a burst of energy that transported everyone on the island to the in-between. The in-between is the true center of the multiverse, where time and space are malleable. The in-between can only be accessed through the 0 point on the island. So what happens next is kind of iffy. We are in the in-between and this butterfly rift comes up to us. We touch it and the rift transports us back to the island. While only seconds pass for us, it seems like days or even weeks passed on the island, as Loot Lake was peaceful and seemed to have recovered from the aftermath. For now, the island was at peace, but it wouldn't last for long because on the horizon, a cloud of ice was growing closer. So now we have to take a detour in the story. The Fortnite island doesn't exist on its own, it exists on a planet with other continents. Let's do a quick history lesson then. In the far past, on one of these continents, there existed a group of elemental kingdoms, similar to the Avatar TV show. Eventually, there was a war where the Fire Kingdom fought against all the others. The destructive power of fire was able to conquer all the other elements, except for, ironically, ice. The Ice King was a tactical genius, and he was actually able to capture the Fire King and chain him up in the dungeon of his castle. But the Ice King knew that eventually the Fire King would be able to melt through the prison. So he sacrificed himself and covered his land in a deep freeze of ice, so cold that the Fire King would never be able to melt it. Doing so, he had to freeze himself as well, and both the Fire and Ice Kings fell into an eternal slumber. Fast forward some thousands of years. The continent was still under the Ice King's deep freeze, so only the toughest of people were able to survive. One of these people was Sergeant Winter, a great inventor and soldier. He created biplanes and the AIM robots. When the cube was created, he noticed the energy that came from the island and decided to pursue it. He sent one of the AIM bots as a scout to the island. This was the one we saw before. Once Sergeant Winter realized that the island held infinite power, he used this technology to break off the part of the continents and travel towards the island. Eventually, he was able to reach the island and started an invasion. However, Sergeant Winter had unknowingly set into motion disastrous events. The chunk of the continent he broke off to travel included the ruins of the Ice King's castle. When he moved that chunk to the island, it transferred the castle from a cold climate to a temperate climate. Therefore, the ice started to melt. The Ice King woke up and realized that somehow the ice was melting, and if it continued, the Fire King would be unleashed. This was already happening, as in the dungeon of the castle, the icy prison started to melt as the Fire King started to use his powers. The Ice King, desperate for a solution, used his powers to cover the island in a deep layer of snow, just to weaken the Fire King a little bit more. But it was too late. The Fire King escaped his prison and was set free on the island. He made his way to Wailing Woods, where he started to grow his power. He started to bring up the magma from the mantle, causing devastating earthquakes. Eventually, he was able to bring it to the surface, creating a volcano. The heat generated from the volcano counteracted the Ice King's freeze, and he even turned the surrounding area into a tropical jungle. The people of the island started to realize that there was something really important there, especially under Loot Lake. And so, they started an excavation of the area, and what they found was pretty shocking. Underneath the lake, they found a giant metallic vault, but they had no idea as to how to open it. But then the vault summoned different keys across the island. Each key displayed a rune which explained how to insert it into the vault. For example, one rune required materials to move, while the other required people to dance on it to move. Eventually, all the keys were inserted into the vault door, and it was open. People jumped in, and they found something pretty weird. They found weapons and items which had seemingly disappeared from reality, all there in the vault. But more importantly, they saw the 0 point for the first time with their own eyes. In front of the 0 point was a desk with a helmet on it, but nobody was there. They must have taken a bathroom break or something. The people who made it inside the vault took the drum gun out, but when they surfaced, something bad was going on. At the same time the vault was open, the Fire King executed his own plans. He made the volcano erupt, destroying Tilted Towers and Retail Row in an explosion. He also fired at Polar Peak, but he missed the castle and instead hit part of the iceberg below. It may seem like he missed, but we'll find out quickly that that assumption is wrong. So the person sitting at the desk in the vault came back and realized that while she was gone, the island devolved into chaos. The person at the desk was an IO agent named Singularity, who was a high-ranking agent in charge of maintaining the 0 point. When she realized that the island was basically destroyed, she took pity on the people of the island and in a surprising turn, allowed them to use the power of the 0 point to help rebuild. With her help, the island was able to undergo huge technological advancements. Tilted was rebuilt into a city of the future, and retail underwent a similar transformation into a futuristic mall. A power plant was set up connected to the 0 point, as its infinite power would supply the island with electricity forever. Fast public transport free of charge was available to everyone, and they were even able to get floating observation bases. To thank Singularity for her help, the people of the island built a giant statue of her in the center of Neo Tilted. However, this utopia would not last for much longer. During the eruption, the prisoner sent some fiery rocks to the base of the iceberg. Turns out, he didn't miss the castle because the iceberg started to crack, and inside, a giant eye started to move. Turns out that there was a giant monster underneath the Polar Peak Castle, and the Fire King just woke it up. The monster, called the Devourer, woke up and broke out of the iceberg, leaving a path of devastation behind it as it went out to sea with the castle on its back. However, it wasn't done with the island yet, as it was spotted circling around it, waiting to attack. Time was of the essence now. They needed a way to fight back against the Devourer, and fast. And what better way to fight a giant monster than a giant mech? Inside the dormant volcano, a construction on a mech began. It was built pretty quickly. After all, they were facing imminent destruction. In around a month, the Mecha was completely finished, and Singularity was to pilot it herself. Then, the Devourer finally decided to start attacking. It surfaced on the northern end of the island and started to move inland. It surprised everyone by firing an energy beam from its mouth. Nobody was expecting that. But they still had to fight back. Singularity entered the mech and started to walk it out of the hangar. The Devourer went towards the vault and started to punch it. It was trying to get to the 0 point held within so it could consume its power. Singularity, not letting that happen, fired a barrage of missiles at the Devourer, injuring it. The Devourer fired an energy beam back at Singularity, knocking her down. But she got back up and started to charge the Devourer, tackling it into the ocean. After both of them disappeared under the ocean surface, Singularity surfaced alone, seemingly victorious. But the Devourer leaped out of the ocean and attacked her, biting down on her arm and ripping it off. Things didn't look good for her. It would be hard to win with only one arm. But she had some more tricks left up her sleeve. In a twist, Singularity went over to the vault, punched straight through it, and brought out the 0 point, holding it in her palm. She used its power to strengthen her remaining arm, and then threw a seriously damaging punch at the Devourer. The Devourer was on the ground, dazed, and Singularity used that time to prepare to finish it off herself. She went over to Neo Tilted and grabbed the statue of herself. As she pulled it out, she revealed that the statue was actually just the hilt of a giant sword. The Devourer and Singularity stared each other down. They lunged at each other, and Singularity drove the sword into the Devourer's head, killing it instantly. Her job done, Singularity piloted the mech into the sky, out of sight. As of now, the danger was gone. But Singularity had done something really strange. During the fight, she broke the vault and exposed the 0 point, destabilizing it. And after the fight, she just left without doing anything to recontain it. For someone who was part of an organization dedicated to keeping the island's reality stable and the 0 point secret, this seemed to go against everything she supposedly stood for. The more the 0 point was exposed, the less stable it got. Eventually, it became so unstable that it released a burst of energy, and this burst sent reality on the island into shambles. It started to bring in random peoples and areas from alternate dimensions and times. Dusty Depot was transported back to right before the meteor hit. Alternate universe versions of people on the island were brought onto the island, such as a female Drift. Places from other dimensions were also transported to the island, such as Pandora from Borderlands, and a version of Retail Row which was in a zombie apocalypse. At this point, Io didn't even try to step in. They knew that the situation was so bad that no number of enforcers could contain it. However, Io had been studying the fabric of reality on the island. They had an idea of how to manipulate it. They would continue to study it to see if they could stabilize reality from their end. As the island continued to destabilize, a mysterious figure appeared. This was the second member of the Seven, known as the Scientist. The Scientist was in a pod in the meteor, like the Visitor, but since the meteor didn't crash, he was able to leave unharmed and on his own terms. The Scientist appeared to be an alternate universe version of the Visitor, and soon he met up with the actual Visitor who was on the island already. Another member of the Seven appeared, and she was only known as a paradigm. She seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, but notice that her bodysuit is exactly the same as Singularity's. Singularity was actually a member of the Seven, and she only infiltrated and climbed the ranks of the Imagined Order so that she would be in a position to further the plans of the Seven. This is why at the end of her fight with the Devourer, she left a 0 point exposed. It was essential to destabilizing reality on the island, which is the goal of the Seven. Also, the Paradigm's description is, her allegiance is unknown, which further supports the fact that she was working for both IO and the Seven. So now, the Visitor, the Scientist, and the Paradigm all started to work together to hatch their master plan. In Dusty Depot, they started to build a rocket like all the way back in Season 4. After they completed it, they launched it. It immediately ripped it into the in-between. Afterwards, using the reality-bending properties of the in-between, they duplicated the single rocket into 7 different rockets. Using these 7 rockets, they were able to break the time stop surrounding the meteor and sent it into a rift. Then right above the exposed 0 points, a rift appeared, and 1 rocket shot down. It targeted the orb and then boosted down, colliding into it, causing a shockwave that blew everybody into the air. Then the meteor came out of the rift, guided by the other 6 rockets. It crashed directly upon the 0 point. The 0 point resisted it, but the meteor broke through and collapsed the 0 point. A black hole was created, and it sucked in the island and everyone on it. The Seven intended for this to be a way for the people of the island to escape the loop. Once the black hole was successfully created, we could see them sending coded messages to each other celebrating their success. But the Imagined Order was a lot more prepared than they had guessed. Their studies into the reality of the island had been useful, as they used what remained of the 0 point's power to rearrange the matter stuck within a black hole into a new island. The Seven, realizing that they've been foiled, went back into hiding once more. The people of the island eventually settled down, as the new island created included pre-built houses, cities, roads, and farms, so everything they needed for life was basically already there. To explore the new island, IO sent a recon team to the island. This team was called Ego. Remember that the Ego team are normal people, not Snapshots. This will be important later. Ego's expedition was initially supposed to be a quick in and out, but their plane had crashed, putting a delay in their mission. They would have to continue the survey manually. They recruited more people from the island, and they set up outposts. While surveying the island, the Ego team realized something terrible. There was a crime organization that had grown on the island alongside them. This organization was named Alter, and what was horrifying about it was that the high-ranking members of the organizations seemed to be clones of the original Ego members. The Snapshots created by the original Ego team entering the loop were now fighting against them. This was too much for one of the Ego members, an agent codenamed 8-Ball, and he decided to go out on his own to kill his Snapshot, named Scratch. He eventually ambushed Scratch and challenged him to a fight. Surprisingly, Scratch was the one who won this fight, and he killed 8-Ball. Now, this was huge. This was the first time a Snapshot had killed the real person they were a snapshot of. Because of this, Scratch started to corrupt. A Snapshot cannot exist in its complete form if the person they are based off of dies in the loop. Then, the Snapshot becomes a glitch in reality. Scratch slowly became more and more corrupted, but he was still able to somewhat interact with the world. While this battle between Ego and Alter was going on, someone was watching. This someone was a wealthy billionaire named Midas. Midas, as his name would suggest, had the Golden Touch ability, where he could turn anything he touched into gold. But he was able to control this power, unlike his namesake. It is unknown how he got this power, but we know that it has something to do with the Skeleton King Oro. Anyway, through calculated use of his Golden Touch ability, Midas was able to acquire companies and properties, further increasing his wealth. With his wealth, he was able to hire secret agents to work for him. The secret agents watched the conflict between Ego and Alter. Whenever they fought, Midas' spies were watching. Eventually, Midas decided to enter the conflict himself. He sent his best spies to infiltrate both organizations. Since they were elites in strategy and combat, they quickly rose through the ranks and became important members of Alter and Ego. Midas himself joined Ego, and when he gave the signal, the spies would encourage their respective organizations to be more aggressive in the conflict, sparking an all-out war between the two sides. Midas didn't want to cause war just for the fun of it. He had a very specific plan. Like the Seven, Midas knew that the island was stuck inside of a loop. It's unknown how he was able to come to this conclusion, But he must have figured out something about the snapshot phenomenon when his agent Bushranger reported about the 8-ball versus Scratch situation. This, combined with other research one of his companies probably did, led him to the conclusion that they were stuck inside the loop, being watched by somebody. Midas figured out that one of the key features of the loop was the storm of dark matter surrounding the island. He knew that if he broke that, he might have a chance of escaping the loop. In order to do this, he would need two things. First, he would need a major distraction so that the people watching, I.O., wouldn't be suspicious of his escape attempt. Second, he needed to build a device capable of breaking the storm. The first part of his plan was already accomplished when his agents infiltrated Alter and Ego and instigated a major war between the two groups. I.O. would be watching that, not him. For the second part of his plan, he would need help. While he had the funds to create such a device to break the storm, he didn't have the technical know-how. He also had to keep his construction secret, as if the effort to build it was too big, I.O. would notice. So he couldn't hire too many people, but luckily, he had the perfect woman for the job. Her name was Jules. She was a master engineer and inventor. And also, we know that she is close to Midas, as he has a picture of her framed in his office. They are most likely related, as they both share the same pale skin and dark hair. Jules agreed to help Midas build a device to break out of the loop, but she wouldn't do it for free. It seems like ambition runs in the family, because Jules requested that she would hold power over the island as payment. Jules was an engineer in Alter, and in order for her to hold power, Alter needed to win the war, and she needed to become a high-ranking member of Alter. Midas agreed, which is why he sent most of his agents to work with Alter and then have them help Jules rise through the ranks. As the war came to its climax, the device also reached completion. Midas activated it, and it started to push back against the storm. The device was successful, and it broke the storm, and for the first time ever, Snapshots escaped the loop. The people at I.O. were running around in a panic as to what was going on. The device was unstable, and it brought Snapshots in and out of the loop multiple times. I.O. was dealing with a serious situation here. They had to fix it fast. Since the storm was broken, they had to replace it with something temporary. So once again, using their knowledge of reality inside the loop, they were able to replace the storm with a giant wall of water. This temporarily stabilized the loop, but some people were still transported across the bridge. One person was able to cross the bridge into I.O.'s headquarters and found his way into John Jones' office. Then John Jones himself entered the office and was shocked by the fact that the snapshot escaped and was standing right in front of him. He asked him a single question: "Can you hear me?" But then that person was transported back inside the loop. It looks like Midas' plan had ultimately failed, but it still somewhat succeeded at helping people escape the loop. It just wasn't permanent. The wall of water surrounding the island was going to break down and flood any day now. No Sweat Insurance saw a boom in sales as people bought their insurance plans against flooding. No Sweat helped those who had bought their insurance by providing them with large inflatables they could put on the foundations of their home so that it would float when the island flooded. Sounds like a stupid plan, but people still believed in it. As promised, Midas led Alter win the war and had Jules take control of the island, but it looks like his plan backfired on him. Alter had already hated him, but now Ego hated him too because he had betrayed them. Midas had to go into self-exile, hiding from everyone. Eventually, when the island flooded, he found himself astray and he was attacked by a shark. Whether he lived or died, nobody knew. Now, the island started to adjust to life in a water world. Alter now held control of the island from a central fortress called the Authority, which was protected from the water by huge walls. However, Ego still held a resistance in a makeshift city in the ocean made out of scrap metal. Surprisingly, the floats No Sweat Insurance provided to their clients actually worked. As the water levels went down, life went back to normal. Without Midas' agents active to stoke the fires of the conflict between Alter and Ego, the war eventually died down and a truce was made. Some of the henchmen on both sides actually became friends and lived a wonderful life together afterwards. However, since this is the Fortnite island, normal life is something that doesn't last for long. A rift appeared in the sky, the first one in the new island. Out of the rift, an object fell from the sky. It was Thor's hammer. Okay, let's backtrack a bit. Back when the 0 point was hit by the meteor, it let out an energy burst that can be felt across realities. Galactus noticed this energy and decided to find its source to feed on it. Thor, who was acting as a herald of Galactus, decided to go ahead and warn the people of the island about the incoming threat. It took him months, but he was able to reach it through a rift and land on the island. However, as he had entered the loop, he had started to lose his memory. Then he saw an object in the sky. Galactus had entered the Fortnite universe, but from another rift far away from the island, so it would take him some more months to reach them. Knowing the threat, Thor remembered his goal to stop Galactus. He used a Bifrost to bring other superhumans to the island to help him. Some notable ones were Tony Stark, Doctor Doom, Jennifer Walters, and Wolverine. Once the heroes reached the island, they all started to hatch a plan to defeat Galactus. They didn't want to kill him, they just wanted to force him to leave the Fortnite reality. Eventually, Tony Stark came up with a strategy. He would use one of the buses on the island. He converted it into what was essentially a flying gamma bomb. He was able to put the bus in the in-between, and using its reality-bending properties, was able to duplicate the bus thousands of times. Eventually, Galactus reached the island, and he was huge. His hand basically covered the whole island, and he was able to bring out the 0 point and started to consume it. Tony Stark transported all of us to the in-between dimension, where the battle against Galactus would take place. All the buses swarmed towards Galactus, fighting against his drones he sent out to protect himself. Eventually, with the help of all the heroes, the buses were able to make it into Galactus' mouth, and they all detonated their bombs, pushing him back to the Marvel reality he came from. The day was saved. We went back to the island, and the heroes went back to their realities, of course, leaving Snapshots behind. But at this point, you know the deal. Whenever the island is saved from a threat, another threat looms on the horizon. The 0 point was once again exposed, and this meant a destabilization of reality. At this point, the people in IO were in a full panic. It seems like this time, it was really bad, because the 0 point being exposed somehow was able to start destroying the office in IO's reality. In the office, John Jones received a call from his higher-up. She ordered him to personally go into the loop once more and try to mitigate the situation. They would be able to close the bridge temporarily, but it was up to him to make sure that nobody escaped the loop meanwhile. Jones located the best bounty hunters and warriors from across realities, and then entered the 0 point to hunt them all down. He then returned with them to the Fortnite reality, paying them to help him make sure nobody escapes the loop. While the bounty hunters did their thing, Jones started to work on the next phase of the plan to stabilize reality. To back him up, IO sent tons of enforcers, now with upgraded equipment, to start a hostile invasion of the island. Any sense of operating under secrecy was now gone. All that mattered was stabilizing the 0 point. However, such a large-scale plan drew the attention of the Seven, and they started to move the pieces of the new plan as well. And that's where the story ends for now. Keep in mind that this is all my interpretation, and this may not be what you think the story is. The wonderful thing about the storyline of Fortnite is that it is so open-ended, so there are many interpretations until more information is revealed. Some parts of this video may be proven wrong as we get more information, but I'd like to think that I was able to get most of this stuff correct. Chapter 2 Season 5 is turning out to be great, and I can't wait to see where Epic Games takes the story from here. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. I have a supported creator code now, it's Rivecha just like my channel. So if you got any V-Bucks for the holidays, please consider using my code when you buy something. Also, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Happy holidays, and I'll see you guys next time.